I always thought heartbreak was supposed to be loud. You know, screaming, throwing things, the big dramatic exits you see in movies. I imagined a storm tearing through my life with a roar, leaving a path of obvious destruction. Instead, my world ended in complete and total silence. It ended in the corner of a dimly lit Italian restaurant, where I was hiding behind a ridiculously large potted fern, watching the man I'd loved for 9 years, the man I shared a home with, the man I thought I was going to marry, kiss another woman. My heart didn't just break, it felt like it dissolved, turned to actual dust inside my chest. But there were no tears, no screaming, just this strange, cold calm that washed over me. I took out my phone, my hands surprisingly steady. I zoomed in just enough to get the moment perfectly, his hand on her back, her fingers on his jaw, their lips pressed together. One single, clear photo. Then I did the quietest, most destructive thing I've ever done. I opened our message thread, attached the picture, and typed 7 simple words: "Enjoy dinner with your mom." Then I hit send. I watched his phone light up across the room, saw that lazy, self-satisfied smile as he picked it up, and then I watched that smile curdle into pure, gut-wrenching panic. His face drained of all color. His eyes started around the room in a frenzy until they landed right on me. It wasn't guilt on his face. It wasn't heartbreak. It was the raw terror of a man who never, ever thought he'd be held accountable. And in that moment, I just stood up, turned my back on him, and walked out into the night. I had no idea that one silent photograph was about to trigger an avalanche that would bring his entire carefully built life and the secret financial scam he was running behind my back crashing down into absolute ruin. My name is Clara. Until a few months ago, I thought I was in a stable, committed, 9-year relationship. This is the story of how I went from planning a future to sitting in a courthouse, listening to a judge read text messages about how my boyfriend planned to not only cheat on me, but drain my life savings. And more importantly, this is the story of how I learned the difference between being patient and being played. 9 years is a long time. It's long enough to merge your world so completely you can't tell where you end and the other person begins. John and I had been together since our early 20s. We'd lived together for 6 of those years in a house I had bought, a fixer-upper we were supposed to be turning into our forever home. From the outside, our life was the picture of stability. We had our routines, our inside jokes, a shared circle of friends who saw us as John and Clara, like we were a single entity. But under the surface, there was a subtle, persistent crack in the foundation. We weren't married. And it wasn't for my lack of trying. Every time I'd bring it up, just a gentle nudge about the future, the same smooth, practiced answer would roll off his tongue. "I'm just not ready, babe. I want it to be perfect. Let's not rush it." For years, I bought it. I kept telling myself good things take time. I'd repeat his words to my friends and family, trying to convince them, and myself, that his hesitation was a sign of how seriously he took commitment, not a sign of his lack of it. I called it slow and steady. Looking back, with that brutal 2020 hindsight, I see I was just making excuses for a man who never intended to show up for me in the way I was showing up for him. I was the planner. I handled the mortgage because the house was in my name. I managed the bills, I negotiated with contractors for the endless renovations, and I was the one talking about retirement accounts and 5-year plans. I was doing well in my career, bringing in a significant chunk of our household income. I was doing all the adulting, building the framework for a future, and he was enjoying it. He enjoyed the comfort, the stability, the home-cooked meals. He was never outright cruel. That's the tricky thing about it. His manipulation was soft, plausible. He was the nice guy who was just a little commitment shy, which made it so easy for him to gaslight me later. He'd frame my desire for a real future as pressure, my questions as neediness. And like a fool, I'd apologize. I'd back off and tell myself to be more patient. He had this way of making me feel like I was the one asking for too much, when all I wanted was what he'd been promising me for nearly a decade. The worst part is, the system was set up to reinforce his story. His friends, his family, they'd all say things like, "He just moves at his own pace, Clara. You know how he is." and I'd nod and smile and swallow the growing unease in my gut. That unease had become this low, constant hum in the background of my life. But I ignored it. I loved him, and I had invested 9 years. You don't just walk away from that kind of investment. Or so I thought. And then came the Thursday that looked completely, painfully ordinary, right up until the moment my whole reality split in two. The day it all fell apart started with a huge win at work. I'd spent months courting a massive new account, and that afternoon, I finally got the call. We landed it. It was a career-defining moment, and my client, a boisterous man named Mr. Henderson, insisted on celebrating. "We're going for a proper steak and Italian tonight, Clara. My treat. Bring your fella." I was ecstatic. I called John, but it went to voicemail. So around 4 p.m., I sent him a quick text. Amazing news. I landed the Henderson account. Client wants to take us out for a celebratory dinner tonight at Rossi's. Let me know if you can make it. His reply came back almost instantly. That's awesome, babe. So proud of you. But perfect timing, actually. My mom just called and wants me to come over for dinner. She's been feeling a bit down. Don't wait up. Love you. It didn't even cross my mind to be suspicious. Not for a second. I felt a pang of disappointment that he wouldn't be there, but honestly, it was followed by a wave of relief. No guilt trip about me working late, no argument about him having to make small talk with my client. It felt easy. I met my client at Rossi's, a fancy, old-school Italian place with dark wood and deep, private booths. Mr. Henderson was in high spirits, and after an hour of wine and celebration, he excused himself to take a call. I was left sitting in our corner booth, nursing my wine and scrolling through congratulatory emails on my phone, feeling on top of the world. And then I heard it. A laugh. A woman's laugh from a few tables away that somehow felt familiar. It was a throaty, confident sound. I glanced up, my eyes scanning the room, and that's when I saw him. My John. He was sitting 3 tables away, a bottle of expensive red wine between him and a woman whose face sent a jolt of ice through my veins. It was Marina, his ex-girlfriend from before we met. I'd only seen her in old photos he'd shown me years ago, dismissing their relationship as ancient history. But there she was, looking impossibly chic. The air in my lungs turned to stone. The restaurant faded into a distant roar. All I could see was them. The way she leaned in when he spoke. The way he looked at her with an intensity one had been begging him for years. It was a look I hadn't seen on his face since the first year we were together. Then, she reached across the table and brushed his jaw with her fingers, a slow, deliberate gesture, like she owned the right to touch him that way. He leaned into her touch. And then she leaned in and kissed him. It wasn't a clumsy peck. It was a deep, practiced kiss, the kind you share with someone you know intimately. The world went into tunnel vision. I felt strangely detached, like I was watching a scene from someone else's life. But I didn't make a sound. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of a scene, of a hysterical girlfriend he could paint as crazy. No screaming, no throwing a drink, nothing he could twist later. Instead, that cold, quiet calm took over. I raised my phone. My hand was rock steady. I zoomed in. I captured it all. The wine, her hand, his face, their kiss. I opened our message thread, the one filled with 9 years of I love yous, grocery lists, and his fake apologies. I attached the photo. And I wrote those 7 words. Enjoy dinner with your mom. I hit send. From behind my potted fern, I watched his phone light up the table. I saw him pick it up, that lazy smile still on his face. I saw his eyes scan the message, his brow furrow in confusion, and then swipe to the photo. The change was instant. His face didn't just fall, it collapsed. The color drained away, leaving a pasty, grayish mask of pure panic. His head snapped up, eyes wide, frantically scanning the room. And then, our eyes met. In that moment, I didn't see the man I loved. I saw a cornered animal. A con artist whose cover had just been blown. I saw the pure panic of someone who never thought he'd be held accountable. I held his gaze for a second longer, letting him see that I saw him. Really saw him. Then I stood up, placed a few bills on the table for my wine, and walked away without a single word, leaving him sitting in the deafening silence of the mess he had just created. I don't really remember driving. I just remember the feeling of the steering wheel in my hands and the blur of streetlights. For an hour, maybe two, I just drove, my phone buzzing nonstop on the passenger seat. The screen lit up again and again with his name. First calls, then a flood of texts. I ignored every single one. The silence I'd used at the restaurant was now my shield. Finally, I pulled into the parking lot of a sterile, anonymous hotel off the highway. I booked a room with a credit card he didn't know I had, walked into the bland, beige room, and locked the door. I didn't cry. I didn't sleep. I just sat on the edge of the stiff bed and stared at the wall, the image of that kiss playing on a loop in my mind. The next morning, after a long, scalding shower, I finally looked at my phone. It was like opening a floodgate. 37 missed calls. Over 50 texts. I started to read. The first few were frantic, full of denial. "Babe, call me. It's not what it looks like. You're overreacting. Marina is just an old friend. She was having a hard time. Where are you? We need to talk. You can't just disappear." Then, as the hours passed with no response from me, the tone started to shift. The panic slowly morphed into annoyance, and then into outright blame. "Seriously, Clara? You're going to be this dramatic? You know, this is happening because you're always working. You're never present. I feel like I can't even have friends. You're so controlling. You're the one who is pushing me away." That was the moment something in my brain just clicked. It was like a switch being flipped, illuminating a pattern that had been there all along. This wasn't new. This deflection, this blame shifting, he'd been doing this for years in smaller ways. Every time I had a legitimate concern, he'd twisted it to be my fault, my insecurity, my problem. I'd just been too in love, too invested, to see it for what it was, a masterclass in manipulation. The last ounce of grief I had was burned away by a hot surge of anger. Not just at him, but at myself for letting it go on for so long. I scrolled to my contacts, my thumb hovering over his name. The urge to fight back, to defend myself, was immense. But I didn't. Instead, I called the one person I knew would be my rock. My sister, Natalie. She picked up on the first ring. "Clara? What's wrong?" I have a weird feeling. I couldn't hold it together anymore. The story came pouring out. The restaurant. The kiss. The photo. The texts. She just listened. When I was done, gasping for breath, there was a short pause. Then she said, her voice as firm as steel, "Where are you? Send me the address. You're coming to my place. Now." No arguments. An hour later, I was on her doorstep. She opened the door, took one look at my face, and just pulled me into a hug. She didn't ask questions. She just held me while I finally started to shake. "You're staying here," she said, leading me inside. "You don't have to think about anything right now. You're safe here." As I stepped into the warmth of her house, it felt like I was crossing a threshold, leaving one life behind and stepping into a new one. I spent the next 2 days in a numb fog at Natalie's. She handled everything. She brought me tea, made sure I ate, and most importantly, she took my phone and put it in a drawer. "You don't need to see his poison right now," she said. But of course, he wasn't going to just give up. On the third day, the doorbell rang. Natalie went to answer it, and I could hear his voice, low and urgent. "I know she's in there, Nat. Just let me talk to her. This is ridiculous." I walked to the hallway and saw him trying to shoulder his way past my sister. He looked awful. His hair was a mess, his eyes were bloodshot, and he was wearing the same wrinkled shirt from 2 days ago. It was a pathetic attempt to look distraught, but all I saw was a man furious that he'd lost control. "John, you need to leave," Natalie said, holding her ground. "This is between me and Clara," he snapped, his eyes finding mine over her shoulder. "Clara, can we please just talk? You're being so dramatic over one dinner." "One dinner." Natalie's voice was sharp. "You lied. You told her you were with your mother. You were kissing your ex-girlfriend. That's not one dinner. That's a betrayal." He actually scoffed. "Oh, I see. Your sister has been in your ear, manipulating you. You were fine until you talked to her. You always overreact, and she just eggs you on. The accusation was so textbook it didn't even hurt. It was clarifying. He wasn't trying to win me back. He was trying to win back control of the narrative. He needed to frame me as the hysterical one and my sister as the evil influence. He couldn't process a world where he was simply wrong. "Leave, John," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "There's nothing to talk about." He stared at me, his face twisting with frustration when he realized his usual tricks weren't working. He left, but not before slamming his hand against the doorframe in a final, pathetic burst of rage. The next attack came from his mother. The voicemails started that evening. The first was syrupy sweet. "Clara, dear, this is all a terrible misunderstanding. John loves you so much." The second was more stern. "A woman's job is to keep her family together. You don't throw away 9 years over a silly mistake." The third was pure venom. "I don't know what you think you're accomplishing, but you're just embarrassing yourself and our family. Stop this nonsense at once." Listening to those messages, one after another, was an awakening. I realized I wasn't just breaking up with a boyfriend. I was extracting myself from an entire system, a family culture that expected me to gracefully accept betrayal and then apologize for being upset. They weren't a family, they were his enablers. Natalie came into the room, saw the look on my face, and took the phone from my hand, turning it off. "Enough," she said softly. "That's enough poison for one lifetime." In the quiet that followed, I made a decision. I wasn't just going to disappear. I was going to dismantle the life he had built on my back. My silence had started the avalanche. Now it was time to see how far it would go. The next Monday, Natalie took the day off and sat with me in a family law attorney's office. Her name was Amara. She was sharp, calm, and had the air of someone who did not suffer fools. I laid out the whole story. The 9 years, the house in my name, the renovations paid for from a joint account I'd put most of the money into, the photo, and the manipulative texts. She listened, nodding slowly. When I finished, she didn't offer sympathy. She offered strategy. "People who cheat don't just lie about their relationships," she said, her words hitting me hard. "They lie about money. They lie about everything. The affair is often just a symptom of a much bigger pattern of deception and entitlement." She explained that while the house was in my name, the fact we'd used a joint account for renovations gave him a potential claim to its increased value. That shared account, which I had funded almost entirely, was his leverage. Amara's words echoed in my head. They lie about money. A cold dread crept up my spine. What else didn't I know? That night, fueled by coffee and a burning suspicion, I went down a rabbit hole. I started researching Marina, the ex-girlfriend. Her social media was a curated masterpiece of corporate glamour. She looked successful and single. But then I dug deeper past the first few pages of Google results. I found a local charity event from 6 months prior. In the photo gallery, there was Marina, standing with a man, her hand on his arm, both of them wearing wedding rings. The caption read, "Mr. and Mrs. David Sterling." She wasn't his ex. She was married, with 2 kids. My hands started to shake. This wasn't just an affair. This was a complex, multi-layered deception. My quiet little photo had the power to detonate more than just my life. I thought about Amara's advice. I thought about 9 years of lies. I took a deep breath, created a new, anonymous email address, and attached the photo. I sent it to David Sterling's publicly listed work email. No subject line. The body of the email contained just 3 words, "Check Thursday nights." The fallout was immediate. 2 days later, Amara called. David Sterling, a wealthy and influential man, had confronted Marina. She confessed not to a one-time thing, but to an 8-month affair. Her husband, not a man to be made a fool of, immediately hired his own team of lawyers and forensic accountants. Amara advised we subpoena John's phone records and financials. The results were the bombshell that blew the case wide open. It was all there in black and white. Text messages between John and Marina, stretching back for months. They weren't love letters. They were business plans. "Marina, once she moves her big commission bonus into the joint account, you'll be set. John, she's clueless. So trusting. I'm telling her we need it for the new roof. Once everything's in the joint account, we'll be solid. Another from John. After the money is sorted, I'm leaving. We can finally start for real. I read the messages over and over, my blood turning to ice. I thought the worst thing he could do was cheat on me. I was so wrong. The worst thing he did was see me as a resource to be drained. He meticulously planned my financial ruin like it was a vacation. The kiss in the restaurant wasn't just a moment of passion. It was a business meeting. And I was the mark. When John lost control of the narrative, he spiraled. When emotional manipulation failed, he escalated. His next move was a classic, the smear campaign. He set out to destroy my reputation, hoping to discredit me before the truth of his financial scheming came out. The first attack came at my job. I was called into a meeting with HR. An anonymous complaint had been filed against me, accusing me of creating a hostile work environment and of being aggressive and threatening toward a female colleague I barely knew. It was completely absurd. My entire career was built on maintaining positive relationships. But a complaint is a complaint. I was placed under a 3-day internal investigation. It was humiliating. I could feel the whispers and the stares. For 3 days, I lived in fear that this lie could actually damage the career I had worked so hard to build. Thankfully, the investigation found nothing and the complaint was dismissed as baseless. But the damage was done. He had managed to inject his poison into the most stable part of my life. He wasn't finished. 2 days later, there was a knock on Natalie's door. It wasn't him. It was 2 police officers. My heart hammered against my ribs. They informed me that my ex-partner, John, had filed a report claiming I was stalking him. He alleged I had been driving by our house and sending him harassing messages. It was so ludicrous I almost left. I had him blocked on every platform. I hadn't been within 10 miles of the house. I handed over my phone, showed them my blocked list, and calmly explained the situation. Natalie backed me up. The officers could see the truth, apologized for the intrusion, and left. But as the door closed, a different kind of fear set in. He was trying to create a paper trail of my instability, a preemptive strike to make me look like a crazy ex when the financial details came out in court. He wasn't just trying to hurt me. He was trying to systematically dismantle my credibility. He would burn everything to the ground, including my sanity and career, just to save himself. That night, looking at the legal documents Amara had prepared, I felt the new resolve. He wanted to play dirty. He wanted to smear me. But I had something he didn't. I had the truth. And I had the receipts. The real war wasn't going to be fought with lies. It was going to be fought in a courtroom. And I was ready. The first court hearing felt surreal. We were there to deal with preliminary assets and his request for temporary spousal support, since he was now displaced from his home. I sat beside Amara, my back ramrod straight. Across the room, John sat with his lawyer, doing his best to look like a wounded victim. His lawyer went first, painting a masterpiece of fiction. He described me as a cold, career-obsessed woman who was emotionally neglectful, and John as the long-suffering partner. He even tried to use my own texts against me, taken completely out of context, showing the judge a message where I'd said, "I'm exhausted. Can we talk later?" as evidence of my coldness. The judge, a sharp woman who missed nothing, was not impressed. "Counselor," she said, handing the papers back. "This looks like normal communication between 2 working adults. I'm not seeing any abuse here." Then it was Amara's turn. She stood up, calm and methodical. "Your Honor," she began, "my client is not disputing the end of the relationship. What we are disputing is Mr. Thompson's narrative and his claim to assets he did not earn." And then she presented the subpoenaed messages. She read them in a flat, clinical tone that made the words even more chilling. She read the texts between John and Marina about my commission bonus. She read the messages where he called me clueless and so trusting. She read his plan to leave me as soon as he had my money. A heavy silence fell over the courtroom. The judge's face had hardened into a mask of cold fury. She looked from the pages in her hand to John, whose face had gone that familiar shade of gray. He was staring at his lawyer in pure, panicked disbelief. He'd been so sure he could control the story. The judge's voice cut through the silence. "Mr. Thompson, these messages appear to outline a premeditated plan to commit what can only be described as financial exploitation. Your request for temporary spousal support is denied. Your conduct, based on this evidence, is deeply concerning to this court." The gavel fell. It was over in less than an hour. As we were walking out of the courthouse, he caught up to us. "Clara," he hissed, his face a sneer. "Are you happy now? You've made everything so much worse by dragging it all into court. We could have handled this privately." I stopped and turned to face him for the first time since the restaurant. The fear I once had was gone, replaced by a profound, pitying emptiness. "You're wrong, John," I said, my voice clear and even. "I didn't create this. You did. The affair, the lies, the financial schemes. The court didn't make it worse. The court just turned on the lights." I turned my back on him and walked away, not looking back. The first major battle was won. Not with screaming or crying, but with documented, undeniable truth. The months leading up to the final hearing were a war of attrition. John's legal team tried everything. They claimed he suffered from emotional abuse. They tried to insinuate I had hidden assets. Each claim was more desperate than the last. But Amara calmly dismantled every single one with bank statements and work records. By the time we walked into the courtroom for the final hearing, John looked like a shadow of himself. The charming man was gone, replaced by someone hollowed out by his own lies. The judge didn't waste any time. She delivered her decision with swift, brutal efficiency. First, the house. It was awarded solely to me. John was to be reimbursed a small, specific amount for his provable financial contributions to the renovations, which amounted to less than 10% of the total cost. His claim to a share of the increased property value was dismissed entirely due to what the judge called his deceitful conduct and acts of bad faith. Second, my savings and my retirement account were to remain solely my own. Third, the joint account was to be divided strictly based on documented contribution. Since I had records to prove I had deposited over 90% of the funds, he was entitled to almost nothing. His demand for spousal support was, in the judge's words, summarily denied. John just sat there, stunned. He had walked in expecting to leave with half of my life's work. He was walking out with barely enough to cover his legal fees. The system he thought he could manipulate had utterly rejected him. Afterward, I saw him one last time in the corridor. He looked lost, defeated. He walked over, all his bravado gone. "Was it worth it, Clara?" he asked, his voice cracking. "Was all of this worth it? You ruined my life." I looked at the man I had spent nearly a third of my life with, and I felt nothing but a vast, quiet distance. "You ruined your own life, John," I replied. "I just refused to let you ruin mine, too." He let out a dry, humorless laugh. "She left me, you know. Marina. Her husband filed for divorce the day after you sent him that picture. She said I had too much baggage. She's gone." He was looking for pity, for one last emotional hook into me. I gave him nothing. I just nodded once, turned, and walked toward the exit, toward the sunlight pouring through the courthouse doors, and I didn't look back. The first time I walked back into the house alone, it didn't feel like mine. It felt like a crime scene. Every room was haunted by his memory. I couldn't even step inside our old bedroom. That night, I slept in the guest room. For the first week, I was just a ghost in my own home. But then, one Saturday morning, something shifted. I woke up and felt a surge of defiance. This was my house. I had paid for it. I had fought for it. I would not let his memory make me a prisoner in it. That day, I went to the hardware store and bought 5 gallons of bright, clean white paint. I spent the entire weekend painting over the muted gray color he had picked for our bedroom. With every roll of the brush, I felt like I was erasing him. I was covering up the lies, the betrayal, the suffocating presence he had left behind. That small act opened the floodgates. I hired movers to take out the heavy, dark furniture he loved. I sold the couch. I bought a new bed, new sheets, new everything. I opened all the windows, letting fresh air and sunlight chase out the stale energy. I went through closets and drawers, bagging up every last thing he owned, every gift he'd ever given me. Each item I threw away was a small act of self-respect. Slowly, normal life began to return. The first time I slept through the night in my new bed. The first time I had my morning coffee without obsessively checking my phone. The first time I realized a whole week had gone by without me even thinking his name. About a month after the final court date, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was him. One last, pathetic shot. I hope you're happy. You ruined my life. I looked at the words, and for the first time, I didn't feel anger or pain. I felt nothing. It was the message of a stranger. I blocked the number without replying. Peace doesn't arrive with fireworks and a marching band. It walks in quietly on a Tuesday afternoon, the day you stop answering calls from chaos. Later that week, while clearing out old computer files, I found it. The photo. The one from the restaurant. I clicked on it and the image filled my screen. I looked at their faces, at the scene that had shattered my world. But I saw it with different eyes now. There was no heartbreak. There was only clarity. That picture didn't ruin my life. It saved it. It saved me from wasting another conversation, another month, another decade with someone who saw my love as a liability and my bank account as an opportunity. It saved me from a future of quiet desperation and financial ruin. That single, silent photo was my liberation. I moved my cursor to the corner of the screen and clicked delete. And just like that, he was gone. It's been 6 months since that final day in court. My house finally feels like a home again. It's brighter, lighter, and filled with things that I love. The silence that once felt deafening now feels peaceful. It's the sound of my life on my terms. Looking back, the lessons I've learned are crystal clear. The first is that patience is not a virtue if only one person in the relationship is practicing it. Patience without progress isn't love, it's a holding pattern. I was so focused on the time I'd already invested that I couldn't see I was just throwing good years after bad. You can't want a future for someone more than they want it for themselves. The second and most important lesson is that cheating is almost never the whole story. It's usually just the tip of the iceberg, the most obvious symptom of a much deeper sickness of disrespect, manipulation, and often financial abuse. The person willing to lie to your face about last night is more than willing to lie about the money in your bank account. The betrayal is a character issue, not a situational one. And finally, I learned the incredible power of documentation. In the end, my emotions didn't win my case. My anger didn't win me my house. The cold, hard facts did. The photo, the texts, the bank statements, that was my salvation. If things in your own life feel off, document everything. Your feelings are valid, but evidence is power. If you're reading this right now and you have that low, constant hum of unease in your gut, the one I ignored for years, please, don't talk yourself out of it. Don't let anyone make you feel crazy for noticing patterns or for questioning things that don't add up. You are not dramatic for demanding respect. You are not controlling for wanting honesty. You are not overreacting for protecting yourself. This journey has been the hardest thing I've ever gone through, but it has also been the most liberating. I lost a 9-year relationship, but I found myself. I've thought about sharing more about the specific red flags I missed for so long. If you'd be interested in a part 2 about the subtle signs of financial infidelity and the manipulation tactics I now see so clearly, let me know in the comments. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to see more. And if you feel comfortable, share your own stories of reclaiming your power below. The more we talk about this, the less shame and silence can thrive. And if you are in the middle of something like this right now, please hear me. You are not alone. Choosing to leave someone who is systematically hurting you is not ruining their life. It's saving yours.